First story, by John Smith. I've always been an outdoor enthusiast, and my friends and I often go on camping trips to explore the beautiful landscapes of Oregon. One summer evening, we decided to embark on a unique adventure camping deep in a remote forest. We thought it would be an exciting challenge to experience the woods at night. The forest we chose was known for its dense canopy of towering trees that blocked out the moonlight, creating an eerie, pitch-black darkness. Armed with flashlights and camping gear, we made our way deep into the woods, guided only by the narrow beam of light in front of us. As the night progressed, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Our footsteps seemed to echo ominously, and strange rustling sounds emanated from the underbrush. We dismissed these eerie noises as the usual sounds of nocturnal forest life. It wasn't until we stumbled upon a makeshift campsite that our anxiety began to spike. The campsite was littered with discarded food wrappers, torn clothing, and empty bottles. It looked like someone had been living here for weeks. Fear gripped our hearts as we realized that we were not alone in this desolate place. We couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that we were being watched. We decided to leave the campsite behind and pressed on deeper into the woods, hoping to distance ourselves from whoever had been squatting there. The farther we went, the more disoriented we became, and it was as though the forest itself was conspiring against us. Our flashlights flickered, and the trees seemed to twist and turn, creating an ever-shifting maze. Suddenly, we heard hushed voices in the distance. We froze, straining our ears to listen. It was clear that these were not the sounds of ordinary campers. We hid behind a cluster of trees and watched in terror as a group of men dressed in tattered clothing emerged from the darkness. Their faces were etched with scars and grim determination. They carried machetes and other makeshift weapons. It was clear that they were not friendly hikers. They muttered to each other in hushed tones, their eyes scanning the forest as if they were searching for something or someone. We knew we had to get out of there, but the dense undergrowth made it difficult to move silently. Panic set in as we realized we were trapped in a nightmare. The men drew closer, and it became evident that they were not just passing through. They had sinister intentions, and we were their unsuspecting prey. We managed to slip away, moving through the woods with utmost caution. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves seemed deafening in the oppressive silence. Hours passed, but it felt like an eternity as we evaded the menacing group that pursued us relentlessly. Eventually, we stumbled upon a trail that led us back to civilization. We didn't dare look back to see if the men were still following. We raced out of the forest, our hearts pounding, and sought help from the authorities. To this day, we have no idea who those men were or what they intended to do to us in the depths of that dark forest. All I know is that our late-night camping trip turned into a horrifying ordeal that none of us will ever forget. Second story, by Emily Johnson. The vast wilderness of Vermont had always been a source of fascination for me, and I decided to spend a weekend hiking through its remote woods. Armed with my backpack, a map, and a sense of adventure, I set off alone on a sunny Saturday morning. The forest was serene and breathtaking, with towering trees that seemed to touch the sky. As I ventured deeper into the woods, I couldn't help but feel a sense of tranquility and isolation that was both eerie and beautiful. Little did I know that this solitude would soon become a source of terror. As I walked deeper into the woods, I began to notice strange occurrences. The path I had been following for hours suddenly seemed to vanish, as if it had been swallowed by the forest. I checked my map repeatedly, but it offered no guidance. Panic set in as I realized I was lost in this remote wilderness. To make matters worse, the woods seemed to be playing tricks on me. The trees shifted and moved, creating an ever-changing maze. I couldn't trust my own senses anymore. Were the trees really moving, or was it just my imagination? The forest had an uncanny way of distorting reality. As night fell, I decided to set up camp and wait for daylight. But sleep was elusive, and my mind was filled with unsettling thoughts. I heard whispers in the wind and eerie laughter that seemed to come from all directions. I told myself it was just the wind, but the fear gnawed at me. The following morning, I decided to retrace my steps and find my way back to the trail. But the forest had other plans. Every path I took led me deeper into the wilderness, away from civilization. It was as though the woods itself was conspiring to keep me trapped. Days turned into nights, and the eerie occurrences continued. I heard footsteps following me, but when I turned, there was no one there. I saw shadows flitting between the trees, their forms elusive and ghostly. My supplies dwindled, and I grew weaker with each passing day. I had no choice but to keep moving, hoping that I would stumble upon a way out. My sanity began to unravel as the forest played with my mind. I started to question whether I had ever been alone in the woods or if something sinister was lurking just beyond my sight. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I emerged from the woods, battered and broken. I was disoriented and exhausted, but the relief of being back in civilization was overwhelming. I had survived the ordeal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the woods had taken something from me, my sense of reality. To this day, I don't know what truly happened in those remote Vermont woods. Was it a series of bizarre coincidences, or did I stumble into something beyond human understanding? The memories haunt me, and I can never shake the feeling that the forest itself had become my tormentor. Third story, by Michael Turner. My girlfriend, Sarah, and I were in search of a romantic adventure, so we decided to go hiking in the picturesque woods of upstate New York. The lush greenery and serene ambience seemed perfect for a peaceful day together. Little did we know that our idyllic outing would soon turn into a harrowing nightmare. We started our hike in the late afternoon, eagerly exploring the winding trails and taking in the natural beauty around us. The sun cast long shadows through the trees, creating a tranquil atmosphere. It was the kind of day that felt too perfect to be true. As we ventured deeper into the woods, we began to notice strange signs. Twigs and branches were arranged in intricate patterns on the ground, almost like symbols. We brushed it off as the work of nature or other hikers with too much time on their hands. Our romantic excursion took a terrifying turn when we stumbled upon a makeshift campsite deep in the woods. It was a haphazard collection of tattered tents and worn-out clothing. Fear coursed through our veins as we realized that we were not alone. Someone had been living here, and they were nowhere in sight. We decided to backtrack and find another path, but the woods seemed to conspire against us. The trails we had followed earlier had vanished, and we were hopelessly lost. Panic set in as we realized that we were completely disoriented and at the mercy of the forest. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we heard the rustling of leaves and the snapping of twigs nearby. We froze, listening intently. A figure emerged from the shadows, and our hearts sank. It was a man, disheveled and wild-eyed, with a menacing grin on his face. He approached us with slow, deliberate steps, his eyes locked onto us with an unsettling intensity. There was something deeply wrong about him, something that sent shivers down our spines. He muttered incoherently, his words a jumble of nonsensical phrases and threats. We knew we had to get away from him, but there was nowhere to run. The man's unhinged behavior sent shockwaves of terror through us. He brandished a knife, and his intentions became clear. He wanted to harm us, and there was no one around to help. With adrenaline coursing through our veins, Sarah and I made a desperate dash through the woods, zigzagging between trees and branches. The man pursued us relentlessly, his maniacal laughter echoing in the night. We were running for our lives, with the realization that our romantic hike had become a fight for survival. After what felt like an eternity, we managed to find our way back to a trail and eventually reached the safety of a nearby ranger station. The authorities were alerted, and a search was launched for the deranged man who had terrorized us in the woods. To this day, I can't forget the fear and desperation we felt that night. Our romantic getaway had turned into a nightmare, a reminder that danger can lurk in even the most tranquil of places. The woods of upstate New York will forever hold a sinister memory for us, a reminder of the darkness that can descend when you least expect it. Fourth story, by Lisa Anderson. Growing up in West Virginia, I had always been captivated by the lush and mysterious woods that surrounded our small town. So, when my friends and I decided to go camping deep in the heart of these woods, I was excited for the adventure. Our group consisted of 5 of us: Mark, Sarah, Tim, and Emily. Armed with tents, supplies, and a shared sense of enthusiasm, we headed into the forest one sunny afternoon. The trees were dense, and the air was thick with the earthy scent of pine. As night fell, we set up camp in a clearing surrounded by towering trees. The fire crackled and cast eerie shadows on the trees around us. The woods were alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, and we felt a sense of unease, as if we were intruders in this natural sanctuary. The first strange occurrence happened when we heard footsteps in the distance. It was unnerving, considering we were miles away from civilization. We brushed it off as the imagination playing tricks on us, but the unease lingered. As the night wore on, we heard strange whispers coming from the woods. It was as if the forest itself was talking to us, murmuring incoherent words. We laughed nervously, attributing it to the wind rustling the leaves, but the sensation of being watched intensified. Things took a darker turn when we discovered strange symbols etched into the tree trunks surrounding our campsite. They were unlike anything we had ever seen, intricate and otherworldly. Fear gnawed at us as we realized that someone, or something, had left these markings. That night, we were jolted awake by the sound of twigs snapping and leaves crunching nearby. We grabbed our flashlights and scanned the darkness, our hearts pounding. In the dim light, we caught a glimpse of a figure moving among the trees, just beyond the reach of our beams. Panic set in as we realized that we were not alone. The figure was tall and shadowy, its eyes reflecting our flashlight beams like those of a wild animal. It watched us, unmoving, and we couldn't make out any features. The terror was palpable. With trembling voices, we called out, demanding to know who was there. But the figure remained silent, its presence menacing and unsettling. We decided to pack up and leave, not daring to stay another moment in that haunted place. As we hurriedly dismantled our camp, we could feel the figure's eyes on us, its presence lurking in the shadows. We left the woods and never looked back, haunted by the fear of what we had encountered that night. To this day, we have no explanation for the sinister figure that watched us in the West Virginia woods. It was a chilling reminder that the beauty of nature can sometimes hide dark and enigmatic secrets, and that some mysteries are best left unsolved. Fifth story, by Daniel Miller. I've always been drawn to the allure of the Appalachian Trail, and one summer, I decided to embark on a solo backpacking adventure through the remote wilderness of North Carolina. It was a dream I had harbored for years, and I couldn't wait to set foot on the famous trail. The journey started out as expected: breathtaking vistas, serene woods, and a feeling of being one with nature. The dense canopy overhead filtered the sunlight, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. But as I ventured deeper into the wilderness, the dream quickly turned into a nightmare. It all began when I noticed signs of another person's presence on the trail. Boot prints, discarded food wrappers, and campfire remnants suggested that I was not alone. At first, I dismissed it as a fellow backpacker, but the unease settled in when I realized that the signs were getting fresher the farther I hiked. As I made camp one evening, I had an eerie feeling that I was being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every distant snap of a twig sent a shiver down my spine. I scanned the woods with my flashlight but saw nothing. The solitude of the wilderness was suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. The next day, the signs of the stalker became more pronounced. Broken branches and strange symbols etched into trees seemed to mark my progress. Panic gnawed at me as I realized that someone was deliberately leaving a trail for me to follow. That night, as I lay in my tent, I heard a voice, a faint whisper carried by the wind. It was unintelligible, a mere murmur, but it sent a chill down my spine. I knew there was no one else around for miles, yet the voice seemed to come from just beyond the fabric of my tent. The relentless stalking continued day after day. I grew more paranoid, jumping at shadows and imagining sinister figures lurking in the trees. My food supply began to dwindle, and I was consumed by fear, unable to enjoy the beauty of the trail I had once longed to explore. One fateful evening, as I set up camp, I heard a twig snap behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, and saw a shadowy figure standing just beyond the reach of my campfire's glow. I shouted, demanding to know who was there, but the figure remained silent. In the dim light, I could make out little detail, only a pair of piercing eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. I knew I had to escape, and I abandoned my camp, leaving everything behind. I ran through the woods, fueled by sheer terror, with the relentless stalker in pursuit. Hours turned into days as I raced along the trail, my mind fraying with exhaustion and fear. I stumbled upon a group of fellow backpackers and begged for help. They contacted the authorities, and a search was launched for the mysterious stalker who had haunted my nightmare. To this day, I don't know who or what was stalking me on the Appalachian Trail. My dream adventure had turned into a waking nightmare, a harrowing experience that left me scarred and terrified of the wilderness. The trail held secrets I never wanted to uncover, and I will forever be haunted by the relentless stalker who pursued me through the North Carolina woods. Thank you for sticking with us through the whole video. Also, I recommend you this video you see on screen, one of the scariest on my channel. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. This helps me bring you more thrilling content every day. If this video sent shivers down your spine, let me know in the comments.